Well, hello folks, and welcome to Referral and Elam. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different. We're having a discussion about the vaccine and the virus, so we are. My name is Sam McClurg. I'm a pastor here in Referral and Elam, but my background is in science. I've done a chemistry degree in Queen's and I graduated with honours, so I did. And Alistair, you're...
Yeah, so my name's Alistair Scott. I'm the elder here in Referral and Elam, and I suppose my early background would have been in the area of microbiology, specifically in virology and working alongside looking at vaccines.
So Alistair knows a lot about viruses and all of this here. He's done a PhD in it. I have a science background, and together what we're just trying to do here is put forward a discussion about this topic, which is very live at this moment in time, to help you make that decision with regard to the vaccine and these sort of matters. We're not trying to tell you what to do. That's not our place to do. Elam itself doesn't have a position on these things. But what we are trying to do is help you to make that informed choice so that you can make that for yourself and for your family. Because there is so much information out there. A lot of it is fear-mongering and the like, and we're just trying to bring some godly common sense into it all with science, etc. So, starting off, Alistair, talk to us about the vaccine and bacteria. What's the difference between the two?
So between bacteria and the virus here, so I suppose the main thing probably that most people don't realise is a bacteria has its own cell structure, and therefore it can reproduce itself.
Okay.
So, a single bacteria can reproduce itself to produce more bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
Viruses don't do that. They're kind of the ultimate parasites. In order to actually reproduce themselves, they need a cell to infect. And believe it or not, there's actually viruses of bacteria.
Wow.
Viruses are really, really small. Something like the coronavirus, you're talking down to a fraction of a micron. So these are tiny. They're certainly below what you would typically pick up on a light microscope.
Okay.
And you're having to go down much lower than that. I suppose the other thing about them is, there's lots and lots of different types of viruses. Most people would be familiar with quite a few of the diseases that they cause, things like measles, things like
yes.
that. And obviously coronavirus at the minute is very much in the news.
Mm-hmm.
A question that people often ask is, well, why can we not use antibiotics against it?
Mm-hmm.
Antibiotics do not work against viruses.
Not at all. It's only bacteria.
It's only bacteria, yeah.
Bacterial infections. So, what really is this coronavirus? Like, I have heard people say, and it's been out there, and people are saying, oh, look, it's only just a cold or a flu, and that's just all that it is. It's nothing special in that sense.
Yeah.
What is the story about the coronavirus?
Well, I think the first thing probably to say is there's not many colds or flu that bring the world to pretty much a standstill.
No.
And I think it's fair to say, this virus is certainly more than a common cold. Mm-hmm. As you can see, every night on the news you'll listen about people being ill. You'll listen about the number of people who've died, and it's an ongoing thing. And the thing about it is, where coronavirus sits, people are looking at, right from the very outset of this, people were looking to see what the mortality rates would be.
Yes.
And certainly it's not a million miles off what a flu would be.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly we know the dangers of flu. And the thing about it is, also in certain parts of the population, so obviously we see at the minute, and especially in those who are older, those who have those underlying health conditions. But even more so now with these new variants, we're seeing it spread more and more into the younger population as well.
Yeah, and I even think about my own brother, because my own brother, he picked it up, he was 40.
Yeah.
He no underlying health conditions, and it just took him right off his feet. And one of the earlier ones that I really came down bad with it. So it's certainly just not a cold or a flu, it's something much more stronger. Coronaviruses have been around, I understand, for because that sort of is a class of colds and flus.
Yeah.
And like for instance, even in rural, with regard for animals, animals get vaccinated themselves with regard to coronavirus. It's in that sort of that medicine, so it is. They've always been, but this here is something. This COVID-19 is something novel. It's something that's new, and it's also something that is very dangerous. And as you said, it's brought the world to its knees.
Absolutely.
And it is something that's very serious. So the vaccine has been made for it, but how are vaccines generally made, Alistair?
Okay, well, there's two types of vaccines at a very high level. Historically, there were what are called live vaccines, and those were kind of like the very first types of vaccines, mostly. Vaccines themselves were kind of discovered almost by accident. In relation to, it was actually in relation to smallpox.
Oh, what happened there?
And basically, it was identified that people who were infected with another virus, a cowpox virus, actually had cross immunity, and therefore didn't actually they didn't develop the symptoms of smallpox when exposed.
Okay.
So it was kind of almost like an accident in terms of how they were actually identified.
Most things in science have been discovered by accident, so they have. Not true.
That is true. But subsequent to that, people have kind of almost then kind of taken it forward, and what they've attempted to do is to take, isolate these viruses and actually weaken them in different ways,
Okay.
whether by chemical treatments or by different other methods, so that when those viruses are put into someone, then it means that they'll gain immunity without getting disease.
Okay.
But moving on to now more recent times, because the technology has now moved on quite a bit,
Okay.
and obviously those are I suppose to put a terminology on it, they're a bit like bucket biology, where it's kind of like a hit all.
Okay.
Whereas now they're very much more tailored.
Okay.
So now, for example, the coronavirus vaccines that are being developed now are very specifically targeting the actual spike protein of the virus.
When you say spike, what do you mean the spike? Is that when you see the globe and then there's like red spikes coming out round it? Okay.
Actually, coronavirus gets the name because it looks a bit like a crown.
Yes.
So,
yes.
and the thing about it is, it's those spikes that your immune system recognises. So the vaccines that are out there at the minute. The Pfizer vaccine, produces those from an mRNA molecule. The Oxford vaccine, well, it actually uses another virus to piggyback on, and
Okay.
it uses that virus to kind of then express this spike protein, and the idea being that when inside the person that's vaccinated, that's what your immune system sees and responds to.
So it uses, in essence, another virus that obviously must be dead.
Yeah.
In that sense, can't do nothing to you. Basically, to get in through the door.
Yeah.
In essence, into your cell.
Effectively, yes. So these vectors, as they're called, have been developed with that in mind, and the idea being that you can slot in the bits that your immune system will recognize of another virus.
Okay. So that sounds like to me that, if I'm hearing you correctly, Alistair, whenever someone is receiving the vaccine, what they're not receiving is the proper coronavirus virus itself. They're receiving a part of it that the body's able to see, know, react, produce antibodies against, and therefore then be protected against the real virus if it comes to hit you.
Exactly. So you're never actually getting a coronavirus itself.
Okay.
So it doesn't. You're not going to have an infection.
Okay, that's good to know that, because sometimes I've heard some people say don't want to get the vaccine because you get the vaccine is going to actually give you coronavirus. It can't, because it's not actually the coronavirus. It's a snippet of it that the body's able to react against. That's good to know. But another aspect, something that's been talked about, is the safety, but more about, I suppose talking about the side effects, as it were, okay? Yeah. Because I have heard people sort of say, I don't want to get this vaccine because it's going to give me shivers, it's going to give me aches, and it's going to make me feel ill, like as if I got the flu or a cold.
Yeah.
But Is that something that is normal and okay? Or, because for instance, you also hear in the news about people having allergic reactions and being severely ill and have to be hospitalized.
Yeah.
And so, what's happened?
So the truth of the matter is, whenever you get a vaccine, you're getting something that's completely foreign to your body being put in.
Of course.
And your immune system automatically recognizes it's something that shouldn't be there. And that's when it goes into sort of action, if you like.
Okay.
And the problem is when your immune system goes into action, the symptoms that you get when you get, for example, a cold, that sore head, that's kind of achiness, not feeling terribly well, you can still get those symptoms with a vaccine. Now, it's not because the virus is because there's no virus there, it's not replicating.
Of course.
But it's your immune system and it's responding.
Right. So it's normal.
It's totally normal. Yeah.
And I suppose, because there's lots of people who have got the vaccine, and like any vaccine, and they've had no aches or pains or anything at all.
Yep.
The body's just reacted, but hasn't been in a mild form in that sense. And so the worst that somebody can expect, the average person, is to have those normal sort of reactions. If there was an allergic reaction, because I think that's something I have to put a wee bit of sense into. If you pull out the average leaflet of tablets, say for paracetamol or anything common, you're going to get a list of, 1 in 1,000 might have this common side effect, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, all of that there.
Yeah.
Those things are all very common, so they are.
And as I say, because all of these things, any drug that you take, any vaccine that you take, that's not normally found in your body. And the thing about it is everybody's immune system is slightly different.
Of course.
So some people will get a really strong response, some people
Yes.
will get a medium response, some people will get a weak response. And the thing about it is, part of the reason that people are going to be asked to stay behind after they get the vaccine for 15 minutes is in case there are any of those sort of severe allergic reactions, because the medical staff will be there to deal with those there and then.
Good. So in essence then, the vaccine is as safe as it can be, and it has been tested.
Yes.
So it has. And we'll talk a wee bit more about that safety bit a little bit later on. But because I want to talk now about the ethics of the vaccine, because something that has been well documented and highlighted is that for some of these, they've either been developed or they've been tested using aborted baby cell lines. And there's been conversations that, when somebody receives a vaccine, they're actually receiving aborted baby parts or cells.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, first of all, you'll not be receiving aborted baby parts.
Good.
Probably what, in order to kind of put this in perspective, as I said at the very start, in order to grow any of these viruses, or indeed, for example, the Oxford vaccine at the minute, which is a different virus, an adenovirus, in order to grow those, they need a cell to reproduce in.
Yeah.
So at the present moment in time, unless it has a cell, you can't reproduce it.
So we can't put it into a living person.
It's not very ethically correct to go around infecting people with it, no.
I don't think you find too many volunteers either.
I wouldn't imagine so, yeah. So from that point of view, yeah, but ultimately, to take it back a step,
Okay.
I mean, those cell lines, and if you take a cell out of a human being, to keep it alive for an extended period of time is almost impossible.
Okay.
Okay? So, but what had happened in the past, back in the 70s and 80s, cell lines would have been taken from, aborted human fetuses, and they would have been immortalized. And, now the thing about it is, those particular cells now have been sort of, I guess, artificially propagated. So they're very, very far away from where they originally, started out. And the other thing is, in terms of, producing these for vaccines, any cellular material that's anywhere in this process will, it'll be removed before the vaccine is produced. These are produced to a very high level.
Of course.
And therefore, these are medical grade, effectively what's being produced here.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, number one, there is no aborted baby parts in the vaccine.
Yep.
The actual cell lines that have been used are not from aborted babies that are constantly being aborted to give this. It's something that happened in 1973.
Yep.
So it was in the Netherlands lab, if I could remember correctly.
That's right.
And that child was not aborted for this purpose. It was for whatever reason.
Yep.
And it was sad, of course. And they have used cells of this child and developed it so as to be able to use it for medical research. And I suppose it is just one cell line of thousands.
Yes, if you can go onto the website yourself, the ATCC website, and you will find, thousands and thousands of cell lines that have been developed over the years.
Okay, so these cell lines are animal cell lines, human cell lines, all of this here, and they're used in essence just to try and test, and they use as a test for the viruses.
Yep.
So some of them work good, some of them don't work as good,
Yep.
and therefore then the ones that work the best are the ones that are used going forward.
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, if you're wanting to produce a protein that would typically, so something like a virus that infects humans, if you're wanting to produce a protein in that way, the best way to do that and the most assured way to do that is to actually do that in a human cell.
Well, common sense.
You can, now the interesting thing is you can do it in other cells,
Okay.
but the thing is there's absolutely no guarantee that that protein that you would produce would actually work as a vaccine.
Okay. So, I think then ethically talking about this then, it's important to think about this. The reality is that can a Christian, in response to this, take this vaccine? And what I want to probably say is a couple of things. Number one, we believe the Bible, and we believe in the right to life, and that abortion is wrong. Absolutely and totally is wrong. But is there circumstances whereby something that happened in the past that was bad and not right, is that something that can be used? And I suppose whenever we're thinking about this, Luke chapter 7 came to my mind. Can we receive something that came about from something in the past that wasn't right? And in Luke chapter 7, there is an incident where there's a woman who comes to Jesus, and she comes and kneels at his feet, and she weeps at his feet, and she anoints Jesus' feet with perfume. Now, the Bible calls her in Luke 7 a sinner, which was language to say that she was a prostitute. And so this perfume was something that was purchased by prostitution, which obviously is wrong and not right. And yet Jesus here received this perfume from her. And in this I see a wonderful story of grace and forgiveness, that Jesus didn't refuse her, even though what she had done and what she was receiving of her came about from something that was bad. And like this vaccine, how it came about were some of them, because I know not all of them are using human cell lines from aborted baby cells, but that how some of them have came about with regard to abortion, that is bad. But I don't think that can necessarily exclude you from taking it, because Jesus received something that was bad in the past, and received it off her. And it was a story of grace and forgiveness. And the Bible tells me, and it tells you, so it does, that God's able to make all things work together for good. Think of Joseph when he says, God, ye meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And when I think about the good that is and will be coming about with regard to this vaccine, that people's lives will be saved. There's families that will not have to bury someone. And livelihoods. I think also then of longer term in terms of children, because all the bailouts that the government are doing, that all costs money and that has to be paid back. And if the Lord tarries, it's our children and their children will be paying for all of this, as well as I think of the poorer countries in the world who struggle then because they're not as wealthy to buy the vaccine. And I'm so glad to hear that. I think it's the Oxford vaccine that's being done at cost for the UK, Alistair, is that right?
Yep.
And I think they're doing it for near enough cost for around the world, i.e. they're trying to save people's lives. And so good is coming about of something in the past that was wrong. And that is a story of grace, so it is. I think also then of another aspect that no one is forcing anybody to take this. There's nobody forcing anybody, Alistair.
That's correct.
And it's the right way to be. And when I think also of another aspect, people talk about, I'm not going to be, you're not going to be able to travel unless you actually have this vaccine. But that's something like of yellow fever, where in some countries of the world you're not allowed to travel, and polio vaccine as well, But, Alistair, we in the Bible are Christians, and that's like anointed one, so Christ ones. We're meant to be like Christ, and the Bible says that he was full of grace and truth. And I think that is something that is so important, because I see an awful lot of stuff that is lacking in grace and absolutely lacking in truth.
Yep.
The whole point of what we're doing here tonight is to try and demyth some of the terrible things that have been said, which are not true. So they're not. And that's important. And so therefore then, the devil, Jesus called him the father of lies. And therefore then we are God's children. We ought to be not propagating lies, but rather the truth. And that's what we ought to be doing. So as a Christian, Alistair, what do you feel should also be part of what guides your choice and decisions?
Well, for me, it's kind of looking at the impact in terms of this vaccine, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the impact on all of those that are around you. It's your family, it's your friends, it's your church, it's those that you work with. Those are the people that you're in contact with day and daily. And ultimately at the end of the day, there is that awareness. Everyone has that awareness. That you could be carrying this virus and not know it.
Of course.
And therefore, you could be bringing something to someone else that is going to make them very ill and possibly even kill them.
Yeah.
And to kind of to know that and to see that that's the case, for me, to me that's the big driver in terms of the
community, the community aspect. And I think you're right in what you're saying there, Alistair, because Jesus gave 2 commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul and mind, and you shall love your neighbour.
Yep.
And that's part of loving your neighbour, whether in the context of family, community, church family, etc. And I think one of the things then that is lacking, especially what we've seen in our country, is I can understand the government being under so much pressure at Christmas to let people mingle together for Christmas. Yeah. But they knew what was going to happen as a result, and we now are all seeing the impact. Ambulances backed up outside hospitals, ICU beds completely full. And interestingly, I heard tonight in the news how that actually the demographic of those who are filling the ICU is actually getting younger.
Yeah.
So it is actually getting younger. What that means is that it's not just an old person or somebody that's got underlying conditions, health issue.
And it's quite likely that, in the last couple of weeks we've heard a lot about new variants.
Yes.
And it's quite likely that those new variants, are driving that, because, the virus, to a certain extent, is getting better at growing in people.
Yeah.
So
it's learning.
And therefore, it will grow better in people.
But just a wee quick point on that, Alistair. There is new variants, okay? And the vaccine was made for the coronavirus as what was. Is it going to work with the new variant?
Well, as I understand at the moment, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
The current vaccines are designed to work against the entire spike protein.
Yes.
So therefore, although there's certain changes on that spike protein, as I understand it, the overall structure, there's not enough changes that it won't be recognised.
So it still works.
And the nice thing about it as well is a lot of these new vaccines can be adapted really, really quickly.
Right.
And therefore, if there are new variants that are missed by the vaccine, or maybe the vaccine is not as good against, it will actually be a lot easier to actually roll out.
The same way that every year there's a new flu vaccine. It's the exact same way. Just twink something and then just put it out there.
Now,
so that's good. That's
I was
good.
going to say the nice thing about coronavirus is
Nice thing about it.
well, it doesn't actually mutate as quickly as the likes of the flu virus.
Okay.
So hopefully that will give us a chance to get the vaccine rolled out.
Yes, all the more. So community is definitely a major part because it does affect everyone around. And also when I think also not just of the initial infection, but also I think of the longer term infection in sense of the long COVID as it's called, because I think of my own brother, how that he has been so badly affected thereafter. He's got fatigue very quickly, and I hear this is something a lot in the news. Symptoms quite similar to ME, and that's a major problem for those people who going out to work day and daily, a manual labour job for instance. If they going to pick up long COVID and fatigue, that's going to limit what they're able to do, and that's going to affect their family, it's going to affect their career, could affect their job, could affect their home. And so therefore then there's a whole lot of loving our neighbour because it's a bigger, wider picture. So it is. Obviously as a Christian, the Bible is what the Bible says, and so therefore then that's important. And I think what Paul said to Timothy, he said because he had a very poor constitution, and Paul told him, look, take a little wine for your stomach's sake, obviously because of the bad water. And so the Bible tells us about using medical intervention to help ourselves, and so therefore then we ought to do that and to listen to that. But I suppose, Alistair, thinking about then the safety of this vaccine, okay, is it safe?
Well, in terms of the vaccine itself, I mean, I know there's been a lot of focus on it, and people have been asking the question, we've never had a vaccine developed this quickly before, therefore, can it be safe?
Yeah.
Now, the truth of the matter is, it has gone through all of the, it has come through all the hoops that it had to jump through in order to be approved.
Now, if I can remember, there's 3 phases before it's released to the public, phase 1, phase 2, and all the clinical trials. So has this done all those phases?
Yes, it has come through all of those.
Okay, so it's done.
And obviously the data has been collected, the side effect data has been collected, and it will continue to be collected. All drugs and all vaccines that are produced today, there's a risk-based approach to their actual development. And therefore, it's very much a case of they will look at, what is the risk of this particular medication. Yeah. And they will look at that in the round. And then, for example, if they see that, there are some, for example, people having severe immune reactions, that will be documented. But then I guess there's a balancing act to understand as well.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you think of any tablet that there is people that certain things that you can't do. Like for instance, I'm on torstatins for cholesterol, and I love grapefruit, but according to that, I'm not allowed to touch grapefruit, so I'm not. It's just something that's not allowed. And the same way, like other medicines can interact with each other. All these things are it's normal. Yes. As we said earlier about the paracetamol, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 can have this or that or the other. Those things are normal, but it is safe. So it is. One thing I suppose is there has been a statement made, and I heard this, that the people that make these vaccines, they actually have got an indemnity policy from the government that they can't be sued. Now, why is that? And is that normal?
It's no, well, it wouldn't necessarily be normal,
Okay.
but it is the case here. And I guess it's because a lot of these companies are taking this on at their own risk. And, they're aware that, if there is something further down the line, people are going to be lining up to sue. So from their point of view, they wanted that kind of reassurance before they would actually go in and develop the vaccines. But from that point of view, from their perspective, it's totally normal because they're just looking at the risk to their business.
Yes, but I suppose the reason for it, my understanding, Alistair, is because that it's emergency. It's being used in this emergency situation. Yeah. It's not being used as it normally would, where it would take the whatever length of time. And therefore then, because of that, the government have given it the okay for use. It's been through all the usual tests.
Yes.
And of course, and I think also the NHS staff, they themselves have got an immunity from the government for the treatment of it, because obviously this is something which is completely brand new, and the world is trying to get a grips of it, and it's being used in this emergency situation, but it's still safe.
Totally, and you can look back even over the last year, and you can see where we started out, because it all started out talking about testing, and it developed on, eventually into the middle of the summer, and then everything kind of died away down.
Yeah.
But we were learning more and more every night, listening to the news about this particular virus and what was happening.
Of course.
And it's still ongoing because, it's only been around for a year.
Yeah.
And we're still learning about it.
Yeah. And I think I think we're getting around a corner. I think we are getting there, so we are with it. But I suppose one thing that's, no one is being forced to take this, as was said, and everyone is put to their own conscience to do what they will with regard to it. And from a Christian perspective as well, there's been a lot of so-called conspiracy theories, as it's said. Like, for instance, this here vaccine, they're actually putting a chip inside you, so they are, which is a lot of nonsense. Because, I see a needle for putting a microchip into a dog and a needle for putting a vaccine. They're a bit different, so they are. Yep. And of course, if the government wanted to follow you or me or anybody, they'd do it a lot more easier for our phone, so it would. I think another thing is the mark of the beast. Sometimes, this is the mark of the beast. You're not going to be able to buy or sell this and that and the other. And it's quite funny because every couple of years there's a new mark of the beast. The contactless card, the chip, that was the mark of the beast because they're not going to buy and sell. Now it's something new. Before it was something else. They keep changing. And so therefore then was like the last thing, the real mark of the beast, or is it really this is now? It sort of loses the point. So it does, and therefore then it's a thing. But one thing, some folk have tried to say, you take this vaccine and it's going to change your DNA. Is that true?
No. I think the first thing to say is, in terms of how the vaccines work, I mean, they're all slightly different. But what you're effectively doing is taking a piece of the virus. Now that piece of virus, in the Oxford vaccine would be in the format, a different format to what it would be in Pfizer. But ultimately, you're trying to get that into someone's cell, and it's in what's called mRNA, and that's like the precursor molecule to make proteins.
Okay.
And that. To be honest, you've probably heard on the news a lot of talk about the Pfizer vaccine and the fact that it's not very stable. And it's not. It
has to be really frozen at -70 or something.
Exactly, and that makes it very difficult to actually get it out to different centres.
Yes.
And the thing about it is, RNA is really, really unstable. And that's the reason why.
Has to be kept. Yeah. The Oxford one would be a normal fridge. Is that because it's a different one?
It's because it's actually effectively in the format of another virus. So it's kind of like, it actually takes the nucleic acid material and it wraps it up in a protein.
Okay.
So it actually protects it.
Yes.
So it can actually be stored in a fridge for
Okay.
many months, I think.
I think it's fascinating that the scientists have all taken different angles to try to solve this problem, and they're solving it, so they are.
I think at the minute there's somewhere in the region of about 80 potential vaccines.
Wow.
Going
In the
through
world?
pipeline. Yeah,
Yeah.
going through
The
at various
pipeline?
different stages.
Yeah, and the government, UK, I think, has 6 or 7 what has signed up to buy, and it's obviously these 3 are now in circulation, so they are. Well, I suppose, Alistair, just thinking then as we're closing, would you take the vaccine yourself?
Well, as I said earlier on, for me, it's really looking at everyone else around me. And, at the minute, I have an 87-year-old father, and I'm looking after him. And I'm really, really aware, anytime that I see him, anytime that I go to visit him, anytime, we go to do something for him, I'm aware that I could be bringing this to him.
Yes.
Not meaning to, but, I'm taking every precaution under the sun, but I'm still aware that, I could be infected and don't know it. And for me, it's kind of protecting the people around me, protecting my father, protecting, the people that I would meet at work, protecting the people, that I would meet even in church, wherever. And it's just making sure that, I'm I suppose, trying to be as safe around other people as I can be.
Good, good. I suppose for myself, Alistair, I would take the vaccine as well. Reason being is for those same reasons as you have said, of course, family and all of this. Now, I would like to have more of a choice, so would, of course, certainly because I know there's been some of the vaccines that have been made not using some human cell lines. But if, in light of some of that not being available, I would take the other one, whichever one was, to help and to keep not only myself, but my family, church family, community, etc., all safe. But I think also in closing, we thank God that God has put minds, fantastic minds together to be able, in science, to be able to solve a problem so quickly, and to start to see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. But at the same time, science is not our solution, our only solution. Yeah. I thank God that Jesus Christ is the answer for the world today. Yeah. And no matter where someone is, no matter what someone is going through, Jesus is the answer. And I would encourage people, of course, to take the vaccine. I can't tell you, but I would encourage you to do it, because it is, from all intents and purposes, it is safe, and development of it, etc., etc. Jesus is the answer. And I think of people who are sitting at home, maybe listening to this, and you're struggling, thinking about what to do. Look, the Bible says, acquaint now yourself with him and be at peace. Set your heart in Jesus and be at peace, and because Jesus is the answer. He's the one that came and went to Calvary to die for your sin and mine, so that we could be born again. His blood is able to make you and me clean and forgiven of our sins. And he calls us, he says, come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And tonight, that's what God wants for you. Rest and peace. In this world of turmoil, there is peace, and that peace is found in Jesus. So look, I hope tonight that the discussion that me and Alistair have had has helped you to maybe answer some of those questions which are maybe in your mind, to make the decision going forward. And I want to thank you for listening and spending the time to listen to me and to Alistair. And thank you, Alistair, for coming to do this with us tonight.
No problems.
And it's been great. So listen, thank you for your time, and God bless you.